Counter-Narrative News wanted to explore several things. On this day back in 1870, Lenin was born, and we're going to talk about that, but how that ties into how this day in 1993, Stephen Lawrence was attacked and killed in a racist attack in Eltham, southeast London. And also on this day back in 1979, the British police had a massive, aggressive, brutal, racist provocation in Southall, which led to the death of a local teacher called Blair Peach in and around the National Front, being forced to have an event at Southall Town Hall, being facilitated by the Labour government and the Home Secretary at the time. So to get into this, so let's just start from the most recent, then going backwards. Actually, let's start from Southall first of all, because then what happens around that time, or that period in the late 70s, early 80s, and then feeding into what happened in and around the 90s with the Stephen Lawrence Justice Campaign, etc. So what you have in Southall is, and this is very much in relation to what happens in the 90s as well, in Southall you have really the black community there, which is largely comprised of Punjabi working class people, but others as well, and there's African Caribbean communities there as well, especially in and around the political cultural movement of the reggae band Misty in Roots and their headquarters there, which was brutally raided by the police, and the police conducted some horrific assaults against their building. Solidarity to Misty in Roots and all the comrades who were in and around that building at the time. So Southall is seeing a black community in struggle really stand up for itself, really kind of galvanized in response to the killing of teenager Gurdeep Chuggar by racists in 1976, which sparks the Southall youth movement, sparks mobilization at the grassroots of the Indian Workers faction, Indian Workers Association factions, one should say, and others. And this is all the time where the whole Black Power radical grassroots socialist movement is really driving forward from the 60s, as we've explored Roy Saw and Obo Egbuna and Michael De Freitas, stroke Michael X and others, really pioneered and were at the vanguard of empowering in a Black Power anti-colonial socialist framework the grassroots of black communities in this country. So by 1979 you have a mass mobilization of black communities all across London and the country defending the community in Southall against this state and far-right provocation. Interesting dynamic there as well between the Labour government and the far-right, which is just a something that's been in continuation really since the First World War up till today. So 79-81 in Southall, you have another uprising in 1981 as well against another far-right provocation at the Hamburg Tavern at the other end of Southall Broadway, which is just smashed up and burnt to the ground by the resistance there in Southall. So you have a relatively healthy struggle here, but already by this time the state is intervening to fund and to defang and to co-opt different radical grassroots formations by funding. It's also very kind of colonial divide and rule funding around colonially defined divisive ethnic groupings as well, to smash the unity around the Malcolm X's concept of the Black Revolution, or Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture, which is then adopted in Britain, the whole Black Power kind of framework of unity between all colonized people of Africa, Asia and the Caribbean and Latin America here. So but still through the 80s, you still have a relatively healthy struggle, the Broadwater Farm uprising, the uprising in Brixton in the mid-80s, and many others. There's a combativeness at the grassroots. The culture of youth is defined by this combativeness. It's still kind of really forging itself together. You have like South Asian heritage youth really deeply going into Jamaican sound system culture with dub reggae, etc. And that's really shown by Tudor Rose Institution, the venue in Southall. And all of West London is full of just Asian male youth just pumping out of their sound systems in their car dub reggae. It's very, very kind of striking phenomenon then, and into the 90s, then the jungle drum and bass is rinsing out of the speakers of the cars, etc., and then house and garage. This is all part of the revolutionary culture at the grassroots. So then the tragic attack on still a vicious racist community in South London amongst the white population there, who just cannot accept the changing demographic of their communities, with the massive entry since the late 50s into South London of particularly African Caribbean communities and West African communities. When I was in an education institution in South London, I was looking at the archive in the primary school, and you see in the 50s, it's just all white pupils, and by the late 50s, and suddenly there's little just, the 3 or 4 black primary school pupils in the classes, because I was looking at all the different the class photos of every year. Then by the early 60s, it's vast majority demographic a population of pupils which are African heritage and African Caribbean heritage in schools in South London. So there's a quick change, and there's still, in Southall as well, you have this white racist resistance that's supported by the state. Same thing in South London and in Eltham on this day back in 93. Stephen Lawrence, confident young man, beautiful young man, very much, kind of like really kind of one of our brothers, one of our people in our community. Black fist with Stuart Lawrence, big it up Stuart Lawrence, much love to you and the family. So he's cut down this horrific attack. It really traumatizes the community. And then you have the vicious police covert operations against Doreen Lawrence and her husband at the time. And, solidarity with them as well. 30 years on, there's still no full justice. Only 2 out of the 6 possible attackers has been seeing any kind of semblance of justice. And frankly, is there any justice really other than the ultimate grassroots justice? That's another conversation. So by the 90s, the point we're saying, the central point about the Stephen Lawrence Justice Campaign is that the state wanted to smash that because it was so popular. People were so incensed, so mobilized around that, so militant there. You can see what happened at the court when those utter racist scumbags came. We just wanted to smash them up. And frankly, in hindsight, we should have just sorted it out, dealt with the matter, dealt with it proper, to quote our brother Skibber D, who passed on a year ago. Much love and respect to Skibber. Should have dealt with the issue just then. Why wait and drag this all out? Because what did we gain out of that? Did we gain anything? Not really. The Lawrences were spied upon by police covert operations. They were seeking to absolutely kind of negate our liberation and justice struggles there. There was many other justice struggles around deaths in police custody and racist attacks there as well, including in South London at the same period. So by the Police Reform Act, which comes out of the justice campaign of the Stephen Lawrence campaign by the end of the 90s, the Police Reform Act of 2000 officially admits that the police is institutionally racist, and we've seen that again with the Casey report just in recent weeks. So, but as in Doreen Lawrence said just a few days ago, nothing changes. Police can be as brutal as they want, and there's total impunity for them. There is no path, there's no avenues for official justice in this country. There never has been, there isn't today, and there never will be going forward. So everything is rooted at our strength, at our grassroots. But that's what was largely destroyed by 2000. Remember as well, around 93, 92, the Welling resistance against the BNP bookshop there in the Isle of Dogs. Again, you can see, the youth were mobilized, the youth were militant. We weren't taking it. We were going to deal with these issues, and we went there and we dealt with it. It's not the situation anymore like it was back then. And in that regards, the state has been very successful. The British state has been very successful to neutralize the potential of the grassroots, and that's what has to be rebuilt again. So then we go to Lenin. How is Lenin connected to the Southall resistance and the Stephen Lawrence Justice Campaign and all the issues around that? The reason why Lenin is very significant, because by the time of the First World War, Lenin gives global leadership around the issues of Black revolution, anti-colonial socialist grassroots-led struggle across the world. He's very clear. He is a global socialist leader. Even Marcus Garvey said that Lenin is one of the most important leaders in the world. I think he said he was the most important, or the person he admired the most in the world. That was the strength of Lenin's leadership, because he was leading many thousands in his militant underground radical socialist movement in Russia, which was a trenchant, merciless opponent of the white supremacy, racism, of the Russian state, which was the Tsarist empire at the time. That was a priority for him. He constantly denounced the way that the state was mobilizing racist death squads in what was called the Black Hundreds. He prioritized smashing the Black Hundreds. He prioritized smashing what he called Russian chauvinism as the form of Russian Tsarist white supremacy and colonialism. And then he globalizes that, he internationalizes that, also in the US context. He's a leader of the Black resistance and the Black revolution in the US by his correct analysis of supporting the Black revolution in the southern majority Black states in the so-called quote-unquote Black Belt, which then continues on through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s with Fannie Lou Hamer and Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, and all the Robert F. Williams, Rosa Parks, all the Black Power strugglers down in the southern states there. Lenin gives that leadership, and Ho Chi Minh comes into giving that leadership as well, because he hangs around with the Garveyites in the US. He's hanging out in New York, and he's understanding very, very precisely what's going on there, and understanding its global significance in terms of Pan-African liberation and resistance as well, and then understanding the unity of colonized peoples in and around that. And then Malcolm X picks that up from the Bandung Conference in 55, and then his speech, The Message to the Grassroots, in the 60s, saying that, reaffirming Lenin and Ho Chi Minh and many others' leadership around this in the framework of the quote-unquote Black Revolution. So Lenin is very, very important in all of these guards. He's not the only one. It's a community of people, but he is a leader specifically in this regards, and he comes to this conclusion, and respect to him, because he draws upon M.N. Roy, who's a revolutionary leader from India, from Bengal, in understanding how you must support the revolutionary grassroots of the workers and peasants and not be stuck in supporting the more bourgeois capitalist leaderships in the anti-colonial struggle, because they will constantly sell out, and also they often internalize Western white supremacy and nationalism as well. So Amin Roy's like, look, no, Lenin, you've got to support the grassroots, because that's the only way we're going to drive through all of this internalization and sellout culture of the bourgeois capitalist class, and actually have a chance to have a go at achieving and establishing our power. And Lenin accepts the critique, and he draws upon Amin Roy, and he accepts that, and then he promotes that himself. And so that's where we are right now. Right now, the state, it's still using developing sellouts, internalizing white supremacy amongst African and Asian and Caribbean heritage people in the form of Kemi Badenoch, Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak. It's all there, right? And this is what Amin Roy was warning against, and Lenin accepts that and adopts that. And then the whole Black Power revolutionary forces of the 60s, again, a big push against that. And then we continue to push in the 60s, and Counter-Narrative News has documented this time and time again, episode after episode. Please do have a look at our other videos in this regards. So just wanted to share and tie these things together, and on this day to remind ourselves, the Southall resistance, 1979, resisting the way that the Labour government forced a National Front meeting in a black community in Southall, leading to a massive police oppression and the death of Blair Peach. On this day, 1993, Stephen Lawrence martyred, slain in a racist attack and an incredible justice campaign. And then tying this all together with, on this day, the birth of Lenin in 1870, who becomes the most important revolutionary leader in all of these regards globally as well. Really important for people to tie these things together, to keep discussing these things, to keep implementing at the grassroots through mass work, and implementing and making a reality our research, our history, our theories, our frameworks, etc. Because it's all very well interpreting the world that's hitherto come until today, but the point is to commit ourselves for revolutionary change. Many thanks.